и так зовет к себе. Еще чуть-чуть и станет совсем несносно мне.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so this week it's time for an episode of the show on Highland Park, and oh, stop rolling your eyes, please. Okay, this is the fourth episode of the show I've done on Highland Park. Yes, I know that. But this is the first time I've actually had the opportunity to share with you guys some of the actual distillery bottlings, and because I don't have any relationship with the distillery and their owners, Edrington, I don't get to taste their new stuff. I don't get sent samples and all that kind of stuff. So it was just by chance I was clearing out a box of samples from the 2015 World Whisky Awards, and lo and behold, three bottles of or three different whiskies produced by the distillery. So I thought it's about time I actually had a look at some of their whiskies, because there's a bit of a love-hate thing. Oh, hello. With regards to Highland Park. Say hello to everyone, Barbie. Basically, the 12-year-old Highland Park, for example, used to be my go-to whisky about 10 years ago. Great price, great value for money, great whisky. And then things started to go a little bit pear-shaped, I think. The quality really started to sort of become very, very variable. And partly I think it was down to the fact, the subject I kind of touched on a few weeks ago with Dzhuss, is that popularity. More and more bottles of Highland Park 12-year-old had to be produced, and I think sort of in some of them the quality of the spirit that was actually going to them wasn't very good at all. And the latest release, whose name I can't even think of, that's being bottled for the States, seems to have suffered from the same kind of thing. A lot of commentators are claiming that it's poor quality spirit that's being, shoved off on the Americans, and I can't comment on that because I've not actually tasted it, but it does seem to sort of make you wonder, should we say. And so anyway, I'm going to have a look at the three bottlings from the distillery, and of course obviously three samples don't make an episode of the show, so I scrabbled around an awful lot to find three independent bottlings or samples wise that I actually had remaining, and I'm not going to kind of compare them with the distillery bottlings, because it's not really comparing like with like, but it's just a general look at essentially, what the distillery is up to, or what the distillery was up to 3 years ago, shall we say. But anyway, I think this is going to be quite interesting, and well, let's take a look at today's lineup then, shall we? So I'm going to kick off with the third bottling in the Warrior series, which was called Harald, bottled at 40%, and this was a series I think that was for travel retail, and again, sort of like you think, 40%, okay, well, but I've tasted some good whiskies at 40%. This is this is one of those sort of bottlings that again sort of like infuriates some people and other people love it. I mean, Highland Park have over the last sort of few years really plundered the supposed Viking heritage of the Orkneys, and I use the term plundering without irony. The marketing department really have surpassed themselves on a lot of occasions, but people love it and people hate it equally, and I've kind of bought into it to a certain extent. I've bought some of the Valhalla, or all the Valhalla series, and I have Viking heritage, and I love all the Viking art and the mythology and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes you think, well, is it getting in the way of the actual juice that's in the bottle? And we shall find out with this one. It's a no-age statement bottling, spirit aged in a combination of American and European oak. Then we're going to come on to the Highland Park 12-year-old, bottled at 46%. Like I said, this was entered for the 2015 World Whisky Awards, so I'm guessing a bottling of around about that time. Then we're going to look at the first of the 3 independent bottlings we have. This is an 18-year-old bottled by Douglas Laing in their Xtra Old Particular range, so cheap. Yes, so this was distilled in September of 1997, bottled in August of 2016 from a refill Hoggy DL11364 and bottled at 54%. Next bottling we'll be looking at again is another 18-year-old. This was, again, not cheap. This was an Editions Spirit, the first Editions Highland Park, again distilled in sometime in 1997, bottled in 2015, again a refill hogshead, HL12009, bottled at 56.7%. And the last of the independent bottlings is just about to say a lovely 21-year-old, oops, just kind of giving that one away, Mackillop's Choice 21, which I think I've reviewed way back when I did the last episode on Highland Park. So this is a 21-year-old, bottled at 52.7%, distilled in December of 1991, bottled in March of 2012, single cask 8091, American oak, probably a hogshead I would imagine. And then we're going to finish off with the last of the distillery bottlings. This is Dark Origin, which I believe got some mixed reviews. Some people absolutely loved it from memory. So apparently Dark Origins is a bottling that they did to, here we go again, although this hasn't got any Viking link. It's to do with someone called, well I suppose it is, Magnus Unsson, who was an illicit distiller on Orkney. Probably had absolutely no tie to the distillery whatsoever, but they thought it was a good yarn. So, and I guess in certain parts of Scotland, when these illicit distillers were given the opportunity to buy distilling licenses, they did. I doubt whether this guy did, because he was allegedly a butcher and a church official by day, but by night, da-da, he was an illicit distiller and smuggler, and well, you know, there you go. So this is supposed to be about their dark heritage, shall we say, hence all aged in sherry of some form or description. 80% being first fill sherry and 20% refill sherry. Of the first fill sherry casks, 60% is European and 20% is American. So it's going to be a big sherry monster, isn't it, really? But we shall see what it's like when we eventually get there. So let's kick off with a bit of Harald then, shall we? Right, okay, let's see what Harald gives us on the nose then, shall we? Quite fresh, salty, a little bit of citrus, barley, apricot. There's a little bit of almost kind of green gage, kind of green banana, stalky, sort of rhubarby, sort of kind of herbally kind of notes. I'm guessing that that's kind of coming from the sherry component. It's not, there's not a huge amount of sherry. It's fairly well balanced between the American oak and the sherry. It's okay. It's nothing to specifically write home about. There's a pleasant depth. There's a bit of maltiness. It's, you know, it's an average whiskey, I think, at the end of the day. And I suppose for a travel retail bottling, at least it's not, yeah, completely horrendous, I suppose. But yeah, it's never going to set the world on fire. It has to be said. Let's see what the part's like. Oh, that is not a nice finish. It's a bit fusty, it's loamy, it's mushroomy. I think I could have lived with the sort of the mushroomy, loamy kind of character as long as it wasn't slightly fusty. There's no real fruit, it's a little bit bitter. no complexity. It's not great, and this is a classic example of one of those whiskies where the nose is giving you one thing and saying, yeah, this is not bad, this is okay, ready for bottling, all that kind of stuff, and you sort of then taste it and you go, ooh, and this is one of those ooh moments, it has to be said. And well, maybe Harold is Harald is turning in his grave if he was tasting that, or maybe it's actually close to what the Vikings were distilling anyway. If they were distilling it, they probably didn't care. Yeah, so I must admit I'm not sort of overly enamoured by that one, shall we say. Not the greatest of starts. Right, okay, deep breath. 12-year-old time. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Well, nose-wise, it's not the worst 12-year-old I've ever come across. There's some barley, some dusty apricot. It's a bit muted, I suppose. Some honey, bit of salt. It's a little bit unremarkable, should we say, and considering this is the distillery's flagship bottling, you know, this is the bottle that most people are probably in the UK going to buy. The reality is you want this to be sort of like absolutely spot on, because, you know, I mean, I think if I smelt this, I'd be wondering what all the fuss was about, to be bluntly honest with you. I mean, it's clean, I'll give it that. There's no off notes, there's no fustiness, there's no mushrooms, but it's kind of a bit simplistic. But let's see what the palate's like then, shall we? I'm not saying, I think this is not one of the worst 12 rolls I've ever tasted. It's a shade maybe too much oak. It's a lot of caramel, toffee, bit of butter, and the oak does bitter slightly on the end, but you know, it's not sort of too intrusive. There's a little bit of citrus, bit of smoke, bit of barley. It's all pretty simple stuff. Pleasant salty aftertaste. But again, it's like the sort of, like, you taste that and you think, well, what's all the fuss about? It's not like it's a nothing whiskey. It's just that it kind of like doesn't really say an awful lot at the end of the day. It's a little bit simple, a bit one-dimensional. Maybe that's because there's a little bit too much oak going on. Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as the Harald, but certainly it's not going to set your pants on fire, shall we say. Right, okay, let's take a look at the Xtra old particular bottling. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Now that's pleasant nose, quite fresh, citric, lemon, barley, plenty of salt, nice kind of coastal character, but it feels just a little bit thin, which is a bit of a surprise considering it's 54%. There's a sort of a layer of kind of toffee. There's some green gauge. There's a little bit again some lime. Some nice kind of mature ing barley. I mean, it's a nice nose. It's pleasant. I mean, I must admit, whether that, I mean, this was on the shelf at the time. When was that? 2016. About £165, if memory serves me correct. And I'd want fireworks, and you know. Yes, I would want fireworks, and I'm not getting fireworks. I mean, it's all very pleasant, But is Pleasant good enough for 165 quid, is the question. Isn't it? Let's see what the palate's like. Aftertaste is quite pleasant, crystallised orange, a little bit of granulated sugar, but again it's all very, very simple. I mean, again, no fireworks, no kind of oh my god, that's incredible. It's all very pleasant. There's some barley, there's some citrus, there's some salt, a bit of oak. It's all well balanced, but it just surprised me that this was deemed exceptional enough to be bottled in the Xtra particular range, has to be said. And you know, the expectations with any independent bottling company's kind of high-end ranges is always sort of like, you've got to wow me with this if you're putting this in the fancy bottle in the box and charging a premium for it. And although this is the spirit itself is good, I think for the sort of for the level it's being sort of aimed at, it just doesn't quite have the complexity factor for me. I mean, you may well disagree with me, and I'm sure sort of Douglas Laing would disagree with me on that particular one, but for me that was just a little bit disappointing, I think. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first edition's 18-year-old Highland Park. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. A bit denser, a bit more barley. Quite summery, aromatic, some honey. Again, a pleasant nose, but again, no real fireworks. I mean, I like the nose, and for the life of me, I can't remember, what this was retailing for. But again, 18-year-old Highland Park isn't going to be cheap, and it's got a good depth. There's no off notes. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no fustiness. There's no anything. But again, it's just kind of very okay. There's a nice little green citric note kind of coming out, and that's kind of sort of mingling in with the salt. And it's like I said, it sort of started off feeling quite dense and quite barley, but it's now become quite crisp and citric and sort of slightly coastal. Let's see what the palate's like. Good intensity. Now I'm getting some saltiness, some fishiness. I'm getting some real coastal character. I'm actually getting character other than a bit of oak and barley and what have you. Nice minerality, lovely salty finish with that almost kind of springbanky kind of fish oils. Lovely intensity, well balanced. Yeah, I mean, I think sort of, to be honest with you, and that is one of these occasions where I think the palate is far more interesting than the nose. The nose was okay. The palate still not really getting fireworks, but I could see that this would be worth shelling out for, because it has a really good intensity to it. So yeah, not too bad. Right, okay, on to the Mackillop's choice. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Finally, it goes to show that Highland Park can produce some absolute gorgeous spirit. I mean, wonderfully mature, sort of slightly milky, buttery oak, Dusty barley, slightly tropical fruit, kind of apricot, bit of melon. Oh, really voluptuous, as we said. Again, I'm not getting a sort of a huge coastal kind of character. It has a little bit of salinity, has some lovely balancing citrus notes. I think I'd be hard pushed to sort of pick this out as a Highland Park, it has to be said. But then again, from tasting these, I'm kind of groping around trying to find the Highland Park character. You know, it's supposed to be sort of like an Highland sort of little bit of peat notes and all that kind of stuff, and it's really kind of not nondescript, because that's kind of the wrong word, but I'm really struggling to get a kind of common theme, aside from a bit of citrus, a bit of barley, and kind of a bit of salt. You know. Anyway, back to this. I mean, this is an absolutely gorgeous nose. I mean, it really is. It doesn't really matter what the distillery is, to be frank. This is just an absolutely sensational nose, and I mean, this this wasn't cheap at all, but you know, this was certainly worth the money. I mean, oh, stunning. See what the pulse like. That's complex. Again, it kind of kicks off with that slightly milky, creamy oak, and getting a bit of salt, a bit of fish oil, a bit of that sort of slightly sort of springbanky kind of fish oil, juicy tropical melon, a little bit of apricot, maybe underripe banana as well, touch of lime, coming back with a little bit of spice, little bit of smoke, and just a little, you know, and then the oak kind of comes back again with that sort of lovely kind of rounded creaminess, and it's kind of like, oh, that is an absolutely stunning whiskey. Again, does it really say Highland Park to me? I don't know, is the honest answer. If I'd have tasted it blind, I would have probably struggled. I would have obviously known it was an island of some form, because it said it on the label. This was actually from, God, I don't know, Independent Bottlers Challenge. Oh, 2013 Independent Bottlers Challenge. And because it said island, non-Isla on the label, at least you kind of like can narrow it down to a certain extent. But again, it... Oh, that was Harald getting his own back. Yeah, does it say Highland Park? But damn good though. Okay, and finally we're back to the distillery bottling. This is the Dark Origins. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Oh dear God. My God, this is cabbage water and sulphur, and do you know that they were flogging this for £65 a bottle, and frankly it's dreadful. It is absolutely awful. All I can get is sulphur and cabbage water. Yeah, there's some dense sherry fruit, but you know, nobody's going to see that. You just stick your nose in that and go, oh. Now, yeah, maybe this was how illicit Highland Park was back in the God knows when, the sort of dark ages, but God almighty, whoever kind of picked these casks really should have been hung up by their nads, it has to be said, because this is awful. It is so sulphur ruined, it's just untrue, unbelievable. I'm going to taste it now, but I can pretty much guarantee I can tell you exactly what it's going to taste like. oh, that's dirty. Oh, sulphur and yeah, there's some sherry dried fruits and there's a bit of herbalness and aftertaste is just like kind of, you know, burnt wood and cabbage. I mean, God, this is just, it's just such a bad bottling. That is so poor. That really is not very nice at all. And like I said, you know, I am kind of absolutely stunned at a distillery of the reputation of Highland Park would kind of bottle that kind of mess. It has to be said, and you know, it's a shame. It really is a big shame, because I think sort of it seems to me that the distillery is kind of, to me, it seems to a certain extent on some of their bottlings, it's just lost sight of what it's supposed to be doing. You know, it seems to think that, you know, it's all about marketing and telling wonderful tales about its Viking heritage and all that kind of stuff, and the actual quality of what's in the bottle seems to be sort of like right at the bottom of the priority list, to be bluntly honest with you. And maybe they ought to dial back on that. Maybe they ought to sort of like go, right, let's go back to basics, and you know, I don't know. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because Highland Park is incredibly popular, but like I said, at the same time, it has you know, a mixed reputation with regards to, you know, those of us that really love whiskey, and you know, putting bottlings out such as that fusty load of rubbish ain't going to do your reputation any good whatsoever. So. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. So I think if we look at the distillery bottlings, they are a real variable bunch, and it seems to me that Highland Park have just fallen into the classic trap of let's bung the crap out onto travel retail and to the American market. They're not going to know, are they? It's a little bit disingenuous, it has to be said, to them. And the Harald, it's just not very good, really. The quality of the spirit is not very good. The nose was okay, the palate was a bit, you know. 12-year-old, well, I mean, you know, that was probably one of the slightly better bottlings of 12-year-old, but again, it had no real character. It was very simple. It was just like, you know, okay, and we'll just stick with the distillery ones for now. And the Dark Origins, well, you know, that really shouldn't have been bottled whatsoever, so the least said about that the better. The Xtra particular 18-year-old, again, I think it's Highland Park. It commands big numbers. Casks of Highland Park probably cost, you know, well, they do cost considerably more than any other cask, maybe other than sort of Port Helen and Springbank and Lefroy, maybe, I don't know. But certainly, I think, although that was a good spirit, I don't think it was really kind of worth 165 quid. The Editions spirit bottling, yeah, I mean, that was better. That was possibly worth whatever the price tag was, but again, it just seemed to sort of like highlight that sort of slightly nondescript, maybe sort of vaguely islandy, sort of vaguely sort of pseudo Springbanky kind of fishy kind of character. It was okay, you know. And the Mackillop's Choice. Again, the Mackillop's Choice was arguably the best bottling in this particular range, but again, you know, Highland Park, it just didn't say Highland Park to me, and it's sort of like, you know, the question, I suppose, was a bit like the question a few years ago with Bruichladdich. What was Bruichladdich with all these weird and wonderful wood finishes? I mean, at least Highland Park isn't doing that, but you still have to kind of ask the question, what is Highland Park? Anyway, and on that bombshell, as a certain other person might say, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. Oh look, Pitch Invasion. Until next week.